Justice David Norman Wecht, who was one of the Supreme Court judges in Pennsylvania, said, "We hold that when a prosecutor makes an unconditional promise of non-prosecution and when the defendant relies upon that guarantee to the detriment of his constitutional right not to testify, the principle of fundamental fairness that undergirds due process of law in our criminal justice system demands that the promise be enforced."
You know, there are terms that are used in constitutional law in America that have been used a lot and which the public relates to, things like due process, equal protection. Fundamental fairness is the equivalent of what we call due process, equal protection. Fundamental fairness means you have to look at a proceeding, and if it violates common sense, everyday notions of what's fair, it should not be sanctioned. And what they said was, how can you possibly let someone believe there's an agreement not to prosecute? How can you possibly let someone believe they have no Fifth Amendment rights anymore in a civil deposition, and then pull the rug out from under them after the defendant relies on the prosecution's agreement? And how can you possibly allow this mess to go forward? And they between the lines, you see, in my opinion, a total disgust with what was done to Bill Cosby. You have very, very learned, courageous judges at the highest level in the state who looked carefully at the trial transcripts, looked carefully at the briefs that were filed before them, and probably spent many months conferring among themselves. How did this happen? How do you have a DA testify under oath? I made a binding agreement and they relied on it because I told them they have to rely on it. How does it then suddenly get politicized, thrown out the door, and this horror show of justice or injustice go forward? It's a very, very unique set of events. And let me say something else. This conviction was not reversed on a technicality. It was not reversed on a gimmick. It was not reversed on a arcane, little understood, little known procedural ploy. The first DA didn't just agree not to prosecute. He first investigated the case. He says, I used 2 police departments, Cheltenham and Montgomery County. I talked to my staff. I talked to our fellow prosecutors. I made a definite conclusion that this case should not be pursued in a criminal court. Mm-hmm. The agreement not to prosecute was based on that investigation and that substantive conclusion. It wasn't based on a procedural gimmick or a esoteric, arcane, technical something. The opponents of Bill Cosby, who don't like this, are trying to suggest that this was not a substantive look at whether he was guilty or innocent. This was not a substantive look about whether this case could go forward. It was a substantive look, and a decision was made the case should not go forward on the evidence we have, on what the law is and what the evidence is. That's what the agreement not to prosecute was based upon, a substantive investigation and a substantive conclusion not to go further with this case. This is not some technical gimmick at all.
Well, right. Justice Wecht said that the court's decision to bar prosecution on those particular charges are both very severe and rare, but he said it was necessary because even though society has a strong interest in prosecuting crimes, has an even stronger interest in ensuring that the constitutional rights of the people are vindicated. 2 other justices actually agreed with him, and they said in writing, what you've basically been saying the whole time, due process does not permit the government to engage in this type of coercive bait and switch.
That says it all. Yeah. It was a hustle. It was a political hustle that corrupted the legal process and resulted in years of injustice for Mr. Cosby.
Right. And they basically said that they could have permitted a retrial but not use evidence from the deposition.
Well, that's what one judge suggested could be a remedy, but the majority said, no, this agreement is going to be enforced. This case should never have been brought. There's going to be no retrial.
Now, from the outside looking in, when you hear people commenting, the one thing that a lot of people would say is, well, Cosby's worth hundreds of millions. He probably paid off some of the judges.
Let me tell you something. There's a misnomer in society that celebrities buy justice that other people can't buy. Well, the reality is the opposite. If Bill Cosby hadn't been Bill Cosby, none of this would have happened. I call it celebrity injustice. Okay, if you're a celebrity with a lot of perceived power and popularity and wealth, you are a target. And if you look statistically, what happens to most celebrities who are prosecuted, most are convicted, not the opposite. Because O.J. Simpson was acquitted, because a few celebrities appear to have prevailed in the system, this misnomer of celebrity justice that can be bought appeared. It's exactly the opposite. You are a bigger target. They throw more resources at you when they come after you. I mean, in Michael Jackson's case, they had the FBI, they had Interpol, they had the local district attorney, they had the local police, they had the local sheriffs. They threw everything at him they could find to try and get him convicted. This is celebrity injustice, not justice. You're a bigger target of everybody's wrath or desire to get something for themselves. This case happened because it was Bill Cosby, a black male celebrity, a popular man with a lot of strong views on things he did and experienced and believed in. A man very popular, a man spent $200 million propping up black universities, helping people get educated, helping social causes he believed in. I mean, if it hadn't been Bill Cosby, I don't think this thing would have gone anyplace. And certainly the trial judge wouldn't have been making the rulings he made in a case of someone with no popularity and no publicity. So keep in mind, celebrities are typically subjected to attacks that they wouldn't be subjected to if they weren't celebrities. The state or the federal government will throw resources at them they don't throw at other people. And the majority of celebrities who are prosecuted in the criminal justice system are convicted either by way of a guilty plea, a plea bargain, or a conviction.
So does this mean, now that the charges were vacated, that Bill Cosby is not a registered sex offender?
He is not a registered sex offender. He is not a convicted felon. He hasn't been convicted of anything, and he can't be reprosecuted. What the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said was this was a hustle, a bait and switch, and an absolute disgrace.
Well, Mr. Castor, the previous district attorney who made the deal with Bill Cosby, he was interviewed after the case, after the appeal went through. He said, "I was right back in 2005, and I'm right in 2021. I'm proud of our Supreme Court for having the courage to make an unpopular decision."
That says a lot. And he was the district attorney of that county. He had the power to bind them, and he bound them. It was political opponents who tried to step in and unwind what he had done, and ultimately they failed. But they put Mr. Cosby and his family through a lot of suffering in the process.
Well, the prosecutors could actually appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court in Pennsylvania.
I'm not an appellate lawyer, and I certainly don't practice in Pennsylvania. My understanding is they can ask for reconsideration or something along those lines. From everything I've been told, it's likely to be very futile, particularly in a case like this. This opinion is about 77 pages. It was carefully thought through.
Now, there was a word going around that Bill Cosby might actually sue the state of Pennsylvania.
I don't know what his plans are in that regard at all. I haven't talked to him. I don't know.
Okay, but if you were his lawyer right now and he said, "I want to sue the state of Pennsylvania," does he have a case?
I'd leave that up to his current legal team. I'm not going to interject.
Okay.
And I don't do civil work. I mean, once in a while, people ask me to get involved in a civil trial, but I generally don't litigate civil cases. So I would not be the one to consult on that.